Welcome to the Lifeline, a production of Simply BJE. The goal of this podcast is to build, inspire, and to empower our listeners through conversations on business, leadership, and mental health. We invite you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline. Now, let's tune in for today's episode. Top of the day, everyone. I trust that you are well, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The Lifeline. We're your hosts, life coach and motivational speaker, Bo Powell, social media influencer and owner of the For Real brand, Pettway, and yours truly, leadership coach and mental health advocate, Barry J. Elliott, also known as BJE. Our goal is to build, inspire, and empower our listeners through conversations around the topics of business, leadership, and mental health. You can visit us at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline and on social media on Facebook and Instagram. Today, we want to dive into a few current events, but before we do, Bo and Pettway, how are you gentlemen doing this morning?
Doing great.
Very good,
it's great
sir.
to be here.
Yeah.
Good to have you as always.
Yeah. And so it's awesome, man. So a lot of stuff has been happening recently in our world. And before I get into the controversial topic, I think we got some really good stuff to talk about. I really want to talk about the passing of an icon. It was pretty interesting. Me and Barry were having a conversation the day before. Matter of fact, not even the day before, the same day. And I was joking with him about his voice. He's got that James Earl, like, Morgan Freeman, very distinguished voice.
Right.
And it, like, as soon as we got off the phone, like 30 minutes later, he shares the meme of James Earl Jones passing. I was like, dude, I literally just looked at that. How ironic. So, guys, obviously he was a major influence, not just in the world, but particularly the Black community. So talk about that. I mean, from your perspective, why is this such a great loss?
Well, that's a very, very good introduction. A lot of times people place him with Darth Vader. I think that was the one voice that kind of propelled him into the world. But when you look at his body of work, he had laid a great foundation to be more than just a villain in a Star Wars movie. But his voice was so iconic that you could take a voice and put it behind a black mask, and change the whole dynamic. So I think that speaks volumes about a strong voice in more ways than one. Literally a strong voice, but just having a strong opinion. So I had to do some research and kind of go back to look at all he's done. I mean, he was 93, so a lot of the stuff he had established before I was born, to say the least. So his body of work is impressive.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, for me, go ahead, Barry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
You good. Go ahead. You good.
No, I was just going to say, just thinking about, James Earl Jones, obviously we, have a high level of respect for his, his body of work in acting and theater. But I think what really resonated with me the most is just the positivity, I think, that just surrounded the aura that surrounded James Earl Jones. Ever since I could remember, he's always been someone looked up to, not just in our community, but just across Hollywood, just across the board, just a well-respected, a man of character. And I think, it's one thing to have a voice, but how you use that voice, I think, is what's most important. And I think he really used his voice in a way that impacted us all positively and powerfully, just as powerful as his voice was. So when I saw that, it's very rare that I'm moved by a celebrity passing because I really don't know him. But when I saw that across the board, I was, moved, and saddened. I mean, obviously we know we're all headed that place, but it's, when people pass, you had that blow. It's like, oh man, James Earl. Wow.
Right.
Definitely was definitely a loss that was felt when he passed.
Yeah.
I think that James Earl Jones, Sidney Poitier, and Harry Belafonte, they were in a class by themselves. And they set the standard high for African American men. And so then I guess for me, the question becomes, who now becomes the standard bearers?
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
good question.
this is sad reality. I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You
I
Exactly.
mean,
know,
that's a really good question. I mean, I'm thinking about that now. Like, who could be? I
who
mean,
could be? I mean,
Denzel?
Denzel, no,
Denzel.
he's a
Yeah,
strong
Denzel.
contender now for
Yeah,
real.
You know
yeah,
what I'm saying?
definitely.
Yeah.
As far
Yeah.
as the body of work, I was
Mhm.
looking at James L. Jones. He started
Yeah.
like in 69, first movie, 70, 1970. So you think
Hmm.
about going through the different types of movie. Back then, it was all black cast, and then you transition to King of uh, Coming to America. So it just different aspects. You think about the roles he was taking when he first started compared to playing a king.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great body of work. So yeah, I think Denzel would be. He continues to live and do what he does. He could be that next one.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. You know, one thing we forget, James Earl Jones was also Mufasa.
Yeah,
Sasha,
man.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Yeah.
can't forget that one. So,
Can't forget
uh,
that one. Yeah.
yeah, and I know we've mentioned some, but what are some things that we can learn, from his life, just as we memorialize his passing recently? What can we learn from that, from him?
Mm.
So
Mhm.
this is what this kind of connects with what I just said about being the standard bearer, but to take it to another level, just looking at how now he's gone.
Mhm.
And now there is a need for, no, let me rephrase that. He's gone, and makes me think about the brevity of life and how quickly life can change. Of course, he was 93, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
life can change in an instant.
Yeah.
The second thing that makes me think about is when people like that leave a vacancy, right?
Mhm.
In whatever area of life it is, whether it's marketplace, ministry, sports, whatever. When somebody leaves a vacancy, how many people are ready for opportunities to fill those spaces? And so I just think
Mhm.
about how many times when opportunities are presented, we're not ready. And so I'm
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
thinking generationally, who's ready to step up to the plate, but then making it personally. We pray for opportunities, but how many
Mhm.
of us are ready to step up to the plate for the opportunity we're praying for?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's yeah. One thing I think we can take a look at if I'm just kind of doing a little research. How he started as a carpenter in 1953, helped building the stage. Then 1957, he became a stage manager.
Yeah.
And then his first Broadway debut was in 58. So he going through life looking at the lenses a little different, how we were looked at. So
Mhm.
traveling all those years up until here recently doing the more recent movies, I think we can look at his life as a process, not quitting, not giving up, continue to keep hope no matter what you see. You will see some change because you got to think how life looked in 57 compared to, doing Coming to America in 98 or Star Wars and just the level of respect that he gained through those different roles he played.
Thinking about it, contextually speaking, just, he was born in the 30s,
31, yeah,
so to see him, to think about all the things that he had to, walk through,
as a man, yeah, the black
as a
man, yeah.
man, the civil rights era, racism, all that stuff, although, racism is not completely dead, but it was very profound at that particular time. And to be able to navigate that, to still present that art of positivity and power, that he never really allowed that to get inside. And I didn't realize that he even served in the military,
Yeah.
so you see someone who touched life in many different areas privately before we got a chance to experience him publicly, and just to see him to be able to walk through all those and still to carry this strong, positive male influence, that everybody admired for the most part. And as you were speaking, it made me think about the importance of succession planning. And I don't know if he had conversations with Denzel or anyone there, but as you were talking about, I was thinking about, I'm a basketball head, and I remember looking at some interviews about Michael Jordan when they were talking about Magic. Did you know that Jordan was ready to take the torch? He was like, yeah,
Yeah.
he was ready to take the torch. And I mean, we knew it.
We do it, right?
So it's funny that you mentioned that about Hollywood, who's going to kind of step in and begin to take those roles as positive influence, because we got so many negative influences, that we tend to look at, so who's going to, and I think Denzel is a great one. And I'm sure there's some others that we probably hadn't thought about, but I think that's really important. So, but speaking of death, there's been some, more school shootings that have happened in the last several weeks. It's just crazy how this stuff continues to happen in our world. So why do you believe that these school shootings keep happening? And what, in your mind, if anything, can be done?
The why question is a mystery. We can probably give some opinions on it. Mm-hmm. Being a former school leader as a principal all the way down to a PE teacher, I've had the opportunity to see students in different lights. And when you see a student in a gym class, it's much different than you see a student as a principal, because you're looking at a bigger perception of it, or a regular teacher. Sometimes students have a lot of trauma in their life. A lot of things are going on and people don't take the time to hear them. If you get to know your students, and I'm kind of going a little left, but once you get to know your students, you can kind of tell that a person is off. If you're a good leader in your business, even whatever it is, if you know your people, you can tell like something's off or what's going on. If a kid comes in the morning and they're acting up, something happened at home, or something's going on at home. So you got to take those opportunities to have conversations. It could be a lot of these games. A lot of the games that kids play are first-person shooting games. Mm-hmm. And they don't understand the severity of death and the finality of death. When you play a game and you die, okay, man, I'm right back on. And you're playing these games for hours. And I know, because I had to have some conversations with my own 3 sons about playing these games. And it becomes addictive and your mind becomes so excited. So I don't know if that was the case with this one, if you want to go take it to the next level and do it in real life. But then you got to look at the parent. It's like the Oxford shooting here in Michigan. The parent purchased the gun for the child. I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. I'm not buying them a gun. Now if we decide I'm going to teach you how to protect yourself. This is the gun. I'm going to give it to you, give it back. I'll put it up. I'm going to lock it up. Every time you have it, I'm supervising you. It's a thumbprint, my thumbprint to get it out. There's some things that have to be taken as precautionary measures, and I'm very on the fence about this, but you don't want to see an armed officer at a place of education. You hate to see that, because that's not the purpose of a school. Mm-hmm. However, when I became a high school principal, they told me high school is sex, drugs, and violence. And unfortunately, that's what happens. Kids dabble, they fight, explore. And I'm really on the fence about seeing a police officer at a school, but it can stop, or it can minimize the magnitude of situations.
P, in reference to what you said about the parent in Michigan, the same thing was true of the shooting in Atlanta, outside of Atlanta. The father provided a gun, and he was arrested. I think he's expecting a life sentence.
Yes.
But I think in addition to the parental piece, I think that does matter in reference to the emotional immaturity of the young people, that plays a factor. In addition to the endorphins that you were talking about, not endorphins is another word I'm looking for. It's a word that speaks to how we respond basically because of triggers. And the same thing happens with drugs, but I forgot what it's called. It's not endorphins. Endorphins are healthy, but it's something else. And dopamine, yes. Dopamine, yes. The impact of dopamine caused by those video games, which kind of, it weakens your rational self. And so you function more off of what you feel and impulse. But in addition to all those things, there's also American greed. And what I say by American greed is the NRA. They're not really interested in the safety of young people. They're interested in padding their pockets. And
Mhm.
so there is legislation that could be put in place in terms of like these semi-automatic weapons and access to those. But because of American greed, there's not much conversation about that.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think it's levels to get to that particular point. Because in these two shootings, Oxford and in Georgia, the parent purchased the gun.
Right.
The parent gave the
Exactly.
gun to the child.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna go old school with it, and
Yep.
I'm not about to give my child a gun. I know
Absolutely.
I gave him a car, he hit something. You know what I mean? And then this is supposed to
Yeah.
get you from A to B, so I'm not gonna
Yeah.
give you a gun. But and I understand why the parent is being charged
Yeah.
because when you look at the totality of parenthood, you're responsible. You went to the store. I mean, he was 14. There's no way he could walk into a store and buy a gun.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
that's
have to put this down. I believe it's, a portion of it. Obviously, there's many layers to the things that are happening in our world.
yes.
Um, but just speaking to, you guys brought up the point of parental responsibility. But I look at this in many different dynamics. It's just a mismanagement of roles and a misappropriation of roles these days. Even when you look in relationships, men are acting like women are being taught to act like men. Children are being put in a position to make adult decisions before they even mature enough, before their brain is even, formed, matured in a place to where they can make these decisions. And so, when I remember as a kid, I was told, a child needs to stay in a child's place, right? And so when you have this mismanagement and misappropriation of power in decision making, how we approach life, just the access that are available to kids, it's no wonder that we're having these type of incidents because, look, we play cops and robbers
Mm-hmm.
when we were kids. I had a BB gun. I had the cap gun and we would, play like we were shooting each other and all that stuff. However, I had a different disciplinary system that I operated in. There was a different, I think, overarching influence that we had, that was, hey, you got rules to follow.
Right.
Where we keep seems like we keep evolving to where it makes me think about judges. Everybody wants to be right in their own eyes.
Yes, sir.
Everybody wants to have their own truth and that we don't have a truth that we're being guided by. So I think there's a delicate balance between, yeah, I have my own personal truths and my own things that appeal to me and that are relevant to me. However, there has to be some type of standard in place
Yeah.
that we all subscribe to and that we can agree upon. I think that's a big part of that. We just kind of lost touch with a standard, which,
Right.
just think about it today. We don't really look to the word of God or any type of biblical principles to guide our behavior anymore.
It's not in schools
So
anymore. Yeah.
it's not,
Yeah.
it's, and it's shunned upon, it's shunned upon, and it's progressively, it seems like even our political climate, things just keep getting looser and looser and looser and looser to where, I mean, you think about just some of the craziness, which is really not part of our conversation, but just some of the craziness that, we have kids who are making decisions at an early age to have sex changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, who would ever thought we'd be here? You know what I mean? How did we get
the
here?
Bible. How did we get here? Well, the Bible says in 2
Yeah.
Timothy 3:1-5.
Yeah.
For we know also that in the last days perilous
Come
times
on.
shall come.
Yeah.
For men
Yeah.
shall be lovers of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone wants likes. Everyone wants followers.
Yeah.
So this is a spirit that has been like a slow drip and is starting to erode. And lovers of themselves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy.
Yeah.
And it goes on and on. So we're living in the times that the Bible has predicted. And, you know, as a believer, we are supposed to follow and walk
Mhm.
under the will of God. And the contrary is do what I want to do. So the other side is saying, do what you want to do, be who you want to be.
Right.
You know, you're born it. No, be who you want to be. You know, just be what you
Mhm.
want to be. Have your own truth. So that has taken on the light, and I think it's trickled down all the way and trickled up all the way to our political climate. So
Yeah.
what do you guys think about this current political climate? How would you describe it? What type of temperature that you have a former president that who was shot at, and then you
Yeah.
have a current vice president who kind of came out the blue because of the president is maturing, aging.
You know,
So, so he's getting the pressure is for you to kind of bow out. And okay,
yeah.
now all of a sudden, here you go.
Dear God.
What are we dealing with? This
Well,
isn't the Ronald Reagans and the Jimmy
Right.
Carters
no,
Right.
and the
no.
George Bushes and
Right.
the Obamas.
States, the
The
statesmen,
The
if you will.
statesman.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This isn't even Ronald Reagan, the actor.
Nah,
This is
right.
But
what we
but
dealing with, gentlemen.
but this is the thing about, Ronald Reagan. It wasn't until old I realized this about Ronald Reagan, but he really was the great communicator.
Yeah.
I wasn't Republican. I wasn't Republican, never been Republican, but he was a great communicator. And even when you go back to the 80s and even the early 90s, there was less discussion or less mudslinging and more discussion about issues
Right.
Policies, yeah,
and
yeah.
policies. And now we have reduced politics to mudslinging and
Much like
hurling
hate crime.
insults.
Yeah,
And
insult.
the interesting thing is, I got into a conversation. I'm sure you both have seen the video circulating about Bishop Jakes talking about the workforce and education, how now America is 25%, is number 25 in the world in education.
Hmm.
And I
Mhm.
responded to one of my friends we were talking about, and I said to him, I said, our problem is that we're more vested in entertainment and ecstasy than we are discipline.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And because there's a lack of discipline, as you referenced earlier, there is really no regard for anything that speaks to propriety or order or
Mhm.
respect. And so, to answer your question about the political climate, it's a culture of disrespect.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And it's been built slowly because, you think about the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, 2010s, it started to throw those shots. And
Hmm.
Hmm.
but when it got to when President Obama was running, it got to questioning citizenship. It became another
Right.
layer of it. And now it's just your own truth is your own truth. I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna be disrespectful. I don't care what you did. I'm gonna take one policy or one soundbite, put it with this soundbite, put it with that
Hmm.
soundbite, put it together, and then I'm gonna create an opinion about you.
Yeah.
So it's really, and what you said about education, this is really the plan of the enemy, because if you can distract people with entertainment, then you can, slowly move in what you're trying to accomplish in this world.
Yeah. I
Yeah, yeah.
mean, as you guys are thinking, I just, the word that keeps coming into my spirit is just the moral decline and moral decay.
Yeah.
There's, it just goes back to there's no standards. And I
Yeah.
used to really be involved in the political process, and then I realized that they're just two wings on the same bird. Um, I just, and I could be wrong,
Yeah.
but yeah, I remember,
Two-headed bird.
you
It's a
mentioned,
two-headed
yeah,
bird.
I remember Bishop Jakes even alluded to this as he began to rise in his level of prominence, how he would talk about how on publicly they're disagreeing, but then they're making backroom deals while we're fussing and fighting, right? While they're making backroom deals because everybody wants power.
We saw
You know,
that,
my
Bo. We saw
yeah,
that. We saw that with Trump and
yeah,
Kennedy. We saw it.
yeah, yeah. So so we what happens is when there are no standards, if you will, again, we have this moral decline, I believe, in our society where, and I don't want to necessarily bring the church into it, but I just have to because I was raised in there. Um, I believe that it's an opportunity for us as believers to really get back to truth and get back to standards. Just because I can't live the ideal doesn't mean I can't speak to it as a guiding post, as a guiding light, right? And I think because the fact that we realize that we are imperfect, which we've always been, it's no new revelation. We've always been imperfect. We've never been really able. We just could act like we could back in the day, and nobody could really find out.
Right.
We weren't so easily exposed back in the day. That
Yeah.
doesn't
Social
mean the
media.
ideals are not still ideal. So I think
Hmm.
Rick Warren
Yeah.
said it this way. He says to focus on the ideal without recognizing the real is a sure sign of maturity. But to settle for the real but not striving for the ideal is complacency. And I think that we have, when we see in this political climate and just in our world today, people have really become complacent. They become lazy
Hmm.
with showing up, with holding themselves accountable to a higher standard. As you guys mentioned, anything goes at this point.
Yeah.
And so when you look at this political climate, it's not even funny anymore. Because
Yeah.
like what's really real, nobody's really talking about policies really
No.
much on either side, to be quite
No.
frank. No, nobody's really telling about what you're going to do because I believe it's really about that. It's about how can I be in power?
How can I look
With
good?
that.
How can
How
I
can
be
I look
empowered?
good? You know what I mean? So let me
Hmm.
let me do what I need to do. Let me say what I need to say so I can get to this position. Although I'm probably not going to even try to follow through, which has
You're
been
right.
going on a long time in politics. So that's my 2 cents on it. To me, it can be discouraging, but you do what you can. You control what you can control. You go out and vote, just hoping that the political process will be what it says it is. That's all we can really hope for, because at the end of the day, what's really real?
That's really real. So when you think about the climate, you
Yeah.
have one side saying, I'm going to take care of the middle class and I'm going
Mhm.
to tax the millionaires and the billionaires. But you have another side saying, I'm going to
Mhm.
take care of this. I'm going to take care of this side. So it's no one is really speaking to the totality of everyone in
Correct.
America.
Correct.
So with that being said, how high are the stakes with this upcoming election?
I mean,
Does it really make
it,
a difference who's in there, or is the 1% controlling where
it,
we are going anywhere? So who does it make a difference who's in there?
well, it's interesting when you just mentioned money, and I was just in some thought the other day, just talking about how we just really moved to making money our God, as scriptures talk about, right? You're either going to serve God or you're going to serve the spirit of mammon. Everything's about money. I mean, even at the lowest level, relationships have been reduced down to money. And I'm not saying money is important. Money is extremely important. That's my field I work in. It's extremely important, right? Zig
Yes.
Ziglar said it's not everything, but it's pretty close to oxygen. I mean, you
Yeah.
got to have money, but it's kind of become the end all be all. It's the end game. It's
Hmm.
about power. It's about money. In many ways, money equals power, right? But not always. So, I mean, how high are the stakes in this election? I don't know, because
Hmm.
what really hit me to it was when the Democrats, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they had control of the House and the Senate at one point in time.
Hmm.
And the Republicans had control of the House and the Senate at one point in time. And again, I could be wrong, but I feel like if you've got control of both House and Senate, then you can pretty much pass whatever you want to pass, push through, because you've got control of both houses, right? So when you have both parties who are in a position to do anything they want to do and push any agenda they want to, and they don't do it, then now I have to really say, okay, how realistic is this political process? And are you really about what you say you're about?
Right.
Or is this all a farce just so we can all out here who are not in these places, we can fuss and fight, lose friendships, lose family members because, one person votes for this person, another person votes for this person, while y'all all getting rich anyway.
Right.
You
And at the end of the day, when it's
know what I
all
mean?
over, they're going to, I mean, and I say this with all due respect, the
Yeah.
real politicians, which in defeat would shake the other politicians' hand,
Mm.
congratulate them, and move on because they
Yeah.
understand,
Hmm.
you know, the show, but we still have to work together. Um,
Correct.
my opinion is God is in control. And as a
Hmm.
true believer, people say it makes a difference who's in there. I guess visually it does, I truly believe, this is me, that there is a certain group of people who really run the world, who make the
Hmm.
policies, who own the
Sure.
largest shares of stocks and
Sure.
corporations and different things of that nature. And with that being said, you know, my God owns the hills and the cattle that's on it. So I have to
Mhm.
trust and believe, and this is just me, that He is going to take care and provide. And certain things have to happen for the Bible to be true. If we want to believe that Ecclesiastes 10 and 19 says, a feast is made for laughter, wine is made for
Mhm.
merry, but money answereth all things. We
Mhm.
have to believe that one day this is all going to end. So certain things
Yeah.
have to happen. So I think it's a high stakes,
Yeah.
um, but I don't know. It's almost comical. I don't even listen,
Right.
because one person is putting this person down, other person's putting that person down, and
Yeah.
one person is promising to do this, but you didn't do it when you was in there
Right.
before, and you didn't do it when you in there now. So all of a sudden you're going to do it. I don't know. Be you kind of quiet. What's on your mind?
You'll call me out. That's something I would do. Um, the stakes are definitely high. I just, it's draining. It's draining to watch because I've been in this place, if I can be honest, where I've been like almost trapped in nostalgia,
Mhm.
longing for simpler times because life at large is just, the world is nuts. I don't have a
Yeah,
big word
nope.
for it right now. The world is
Yeah.
nuts. And my life has just been crazy. And if I didn't know the Lord, I'd probably just say, to heck with all this and not say heck. It's been real. But this morning when I was praying, this is what I said to the Lord. I said, Lord, help me not to get lost in the nostalgia of yesterday, but help me to see the purpose of today and the
Mhm.
possibilities of tomorrow. Despite all that's happening in the political system, my hope is still in the Lord. Now, it's annoying to see all this crap.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say crap on?
Mm-hmm.
It's annoying to see all of this. The stakes are high, but I have to live by higher reality. That's not to say that I'm not going to vote, because I am going to vote.
Mm-hmm.
The stakes are definitely high, and either way it goes is going to be costly. Somebody said this, and I tend to agree, because I will say that one of the things that this election highlights for me is that of the hypocrisy. If Obama had done half of what Trump has done, he would be strange fruit. So I struggle with the hypocrisy that I see in the political system. Now I know, of course, this man is it's going to have that issue, but it's overt. And so again, the stakes are high, but I have to set my attention on something greater than the political system. Because if I keep looking at the political system, it's going to stress me out. And I'm already bald, so having more hair to
Right,
lose,
right.
so,
Yeah,
so
we can't let it continue to distract us.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
even looking at the past can be a distraction.
correct.
Um,
Absolutely.
because we have to continue to move forward, because we don't want to be distracted in yesterday. So, what does the next 5 to 10 years look like? What do we look like? We're hearing this certain project, that's this certain agenda that one party has. We hear that this is a get ready for a cyber attack. We got hit personally, my dealership and my industry,
Yeah.
with a cyber attack that crippled our industry, and they paid a $20 million ransom.
Yeah.
So what do we look like in 5 to 10 years? They're talking about another strand of COVID might hit. I mean, what are we doing? Are we
I
getting
mean,
going?
that's a really good question. I mean, with the cyber attacks, it hit the healthcare system too. I do some
Mm-hmm.
counseling on the side. It hit those systems really hard. I want to say early spring of
Yeah.
this year. To be quite frank about it, is I don't know what the next 5 or 10 years are going to look like. I do believe there are a demographic or a group of people who ultimately wield a lot of power and influence, like you mentioned, Lynchburg. So I know those interests are going to be protected.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is to more than anything to begin to operate from an inside out or an inside up perspective. I think so many times, and is we kind of get caught up in the things that are going on outwardly and not really having an opportunity to look inwardly and then up to God to see how we are to influence this world that we're in. And so, from a personal standpoint, I would say, and I would encourage, you all and even our listeners to look at, okay, what would God have me to do in the midst of all this foolishness or craziness that's happening in the world? Because just like Christ said, he said that we are the light. We call him the light, but he says we are the light.
Right.
So for me, I think the next 5 or 10 years will be an opportunity, though, for those who are of the light to actually be the light and
Right.
not get so caught up in yelling at the darkness. As I heard Bishop Jakes allude to this he says, don't yell at the darkness, just light a candle. Just to be the light in the world in the midst of all this chaos that people can begin to look to. So I would say these next 5, 10 years will be a grand opportunity for those of us who are about purpose, who are on purpose, who are in purpose, to begin to fully function in purpose, to begin to see where our influence can be, to get outside the boxes that we've lived in for the last decade or so, if not longer, to get out of the silos we find ourselves in, to really allow God to be God in us and through us in this next 5 to 10 years. I believe that's what these next 5. Now, how that's going to, I believe, our nation is going to be what it's going to be.
Correct.
If those of us, we're all either 50 or older or in age, and you in spirit, Barry, so you've been around long enough to, matter of fact, you're probably older than me in Lynchburg, if we want to be quite honest about it. You've been, but we just kind of seen how things have just kind of declined. So for us, I believe we can kind of see the patterns, if you will. I think we can also look at how we may have been standing outside waiting for somebody to do something when that could be an opportunity for us to make a bigger difference and to make a bigger impact ourselves. That would be my take on the next 5 to 10 years. I do see in the midst of some of the bad that's happened over the last few years, some positive things. And I don't mean to be long-winded. Maybe I do, but just in 2020, I mean, in the midst of the pandemic, and when what that happened to George Floyd, I believe that shifted some perspectives. We may not have seen it publicly, but I'll tell you a quick story. Because I believe, as far as when we talk about the racism thing, and we didn't get a chance to talk about Tyreek Hill, maybe we'll talk about that on a later deal. But I know there was a shifting that took place among our white counterparts when they saw, George Floyd hit the guy, bit on his neck, and he yelling for his mama. That shifted. I remember I was going to Kroger in Saginaw, Texas, and there was an older white woman, and I remember I was pulling the parking space, and I respectfully allowed them to pass on before I parked, and it was just the look that she looked at me. It was such a look of compassion. One,
Wow.
There was a look of even apologetic. Like, I'm so sorry. It was almost like she says, I understand. I get chills just thinking about it. I'll never forget that moment. How she and she had to be probably 70 years old. So I know she's been around for a while. And so I believe that year exposed some things. And so in light of all that, I'll end with this. I'm encouraged about the next 5 to 10 years because I believe there's some things that are happening underneath what we see publicly that are going to be positive, that are going to bring about impact. I believe it always gets worse before it gets better. It's always the darkest before the dawn. So I think these next 5 to 10 years, in light of all the craziness that could possibly happen, I believe there's going to be some good. The thing about it is we're just going to have to sift through all the mess to find the good, because we know drama sells. And so what we see on the internet is not necessarily indicative of what's really happening. So, that's my take on the next 5, 10 years.
That's good. I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I don't know. I just think that for those of us that are persons of faith, we're gonna have to lean into that faith And then, as you said, we're going to have to be a light.
Yeah.
Because I think really part of the reason why we see so much darkness in the world is that we as a body of believers, we've become so insular that we've not really made the impact outwardly that we could have made.
That is true.
I would say, I don't know if we really understand the power that we have with our words, and that's what, just to bring even more clarity, what that comment I made, or the quote I made about Bishop Jakes, don't yell at the darkness, because the power of death and life is in the tongue. So whatever we speak to, we give life to.
Yeah.
And so if we continue to speak negatively, instead of reframing the conversation into a more positive light, it's a difference that I'm really, really sick, or saying, hey, I'm healed. Still acknowledging the same thing, but speaking to it a different way. And so oftentimes I think we get caught up in the conversations instead of rising above it and seeing how we can operate to change it. First of all, with our voice, and then second of all, with our actions and our activities. So again, I think it's a great opportunity for us to begin to operate differently, to begin to, instead of hitting the rock like Moses did, to speak to the rock, right? But speak to it in the right way. Speak life, and not continue to give life to dead situations, if that makes sense. Some things God may be trying to kill off, but because we keep talking about it, we keep giving it life. And because we keep speaking to it, it continues to exist, and it to exist in our experience in a way that impacts us in a negative way. So that's, again, just, I want to really speak life and light, as we call to do through this podcast, about what the next 5 or 10 years, that stuff's going to be, man. But how are we going to function as a body of believers, as men of God? How are we going to function? How are we going to make a difference in the light of all that?
And I'll just keep it real. I mean, we have our own goals and situations in which we're looking at between the next 5 and 10. So trying to balance that in accordance to what the Lord has given us in our own house, and then taking it and stretching it out and being the example in the workplace, in the streets, in the gym, and counseling and teaching classes and doing all the things that we are doing. It just takes some balance. And then if we have kids, I look at it as this: I need to make an impact in these 3 young men, so when they get out there, they have some old school foundation and values, so they can make an impact, and then they can make an impact, and so on and so on. Because it's easy to just kind of fall in the background, as they say, fade to the black, when everybody's doing this, that, and other. But if I can teach them, no, that's not right. Yeah. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they're doing. I don't care how many people are doing it. That's not right. Because it just, and giving them the reason why. So, yeah, the next 5 and 10 is going to be interesting. We're going to have to stay on our knees, stay praying, and fasting.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, this concludes another episode of The Lifeline with your hosts, BJE, Lindsberg Pettway, and Bo Powell. Don't forget to check us out on social media and at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline. Look, we're on a mission. We want to bring light and life into your household. So join us and let us hear your feedback, because it's all about bringing life to you on The Lifeline. Y'all take care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with host, business expert, and life coach Bo Powell, social media influencer and entrepreneur Lindsberg Pettway, and leadership coach and mental health advocate Barry J. Elliott. Join us next week for another impactful conversation on The Lifeline. God bless.